Welcome to the History of Architecture and Bricks. Huzzah! I'm Robert Lane. My current project is a headquarters building for the largest internet sales company in the world, about a block west of here. One of the features of the building include accents in Amazon orange. So this discussion should be about half an hour long. I'll take questions afterwards via the microphone. It should be somewhat humorous. I've used photographs of the many MOCs that I have seen at various cons. Yours might be in there as a fine example of one of the architectural styles I will illustrate. This discussion is brief. If I missed your favorite style, I may have had a hard time finding it in a MOC. If you have a better example of one of the ones I'll show, please give me your information afterwards. In addition to the various architectural styles, there will be quizzes during this discussion. Feel free to shout out your responses during that time. I will demonstrate the answer in the slide presentation. First, we're going to go over an architectural concept called proportion. The human brain organizes information and relates it to what it knows. So these are the three primary column orders: Ionic, Doric, and Corinthian. Note they have three parts. They have a top or a capital, a middle or a shaft, and a bottom or a base. These correlate to the human head, torso, and feet. The proportion is relatable to any object or art form, as they're proportional to the human body, and they appear correct to the human eye. So I couldn't find a Lego version of these, but these are the famous caryatid columns of the Erechtheum in Athens. This is immediately adjacent to the Temple of Athena on the Acropolis. But you can see the proportion of the columns to the human form. These 6 columns are some of the rarest in the world. There's only one in pristine condition at the British Museum. You can see the capital, the shaft, and the base relationship to the human form. So it's kind of funny, in Lego, we have the minifig, and the minifig is actually a squashed version of a human. It's not 1:1, it's actually about 1 to 0.5, or about half height, half scale. Therefore, anything that's minifig scale is actually about half scale, which I think is kind of funny. So we'll get on to the history portion of the program, prehistory. So in the beginning, the earth was formless and empty. The darkness was over the surface of the deep. This MOC should include a top, a middle, and a bottom, right? To be proportional. You can see the top is kind of the top of the mountain. The middle includes a mammoth, and the base includes a cave with a couple of minifigs for scale. So very cool. The next I have is Egyptian. Great Pyramid of Giza, 2600 BC. You can see the tippy top is made of gold. That's the top. The middle is the base, or the body of the pyramid, and the base would be the funerary structures, which are in the foreground, and some trees for scale. So the primary shapes of architecture include the circle, the right triangle, and the square. There are rectangles, there are isosceles triangles, there are ovals, but these are derivative of the primary shapes. So the primary shapes appear perfect to the human eye, just like the Great Pyramid of Giza, which is a right triangle. So next up we have Greek. Greek Temple of Athena, 600 BC. Greek architecture was forgotten during the Middle Ages and rediscovered during the Renaissance. And then again in Greek revival and some other movements. So notice the length, the height, and the form of the roof. This temple is white, but research has pointed out that the temples are actually brightly colored. The primary form is marble, so it's all white. The roof is marble. Some of the roof spanning elements are actually wood in the actual structure. So the Greek temple parts, these appear forever in historic forms, even on certain houses in Seattle, like the Daughters of the American Revolution Chapter House or St. James Cathedral. You don't have to go very far before you find a cornice, a pediment, a frieze, the metopes, which are on the frieze, the architrave directly below, those Doric columns. Now, it's not so easy to find the sacrifice to Zeus, which is down at the bottom, especially on Capitol Hill, but you can go look for yourself, try to find one. Roman comes next. Roman architecture relates to very large structures, in this case, the Colosseum. The Colosseum, well, the Romans incorporated anything they could find from architectural styles, from lands they conquered. This one includes specifically the Roman arch. Notice the arch in almost every opening in this structure. Now, most of their structures use the primary forms of circle, square, and triangle, right triangle. The Colosseum breaks the mold because it's an oval. So one of the things the Romans were, of course, very good at is taking anything that they found. The Lego Colosseum, which is on the right in this illustration, includes the Greek architectural style of the Greek Corinthian columns. They're the ones with 2 layers of acanthus leaves and scrolls, the Ionic columns, which include the scrolls, and the Doric columns, which have clean, round capitals. These were taken by the Romans from the islands of Ionia and the islands of Doria. The Romans put them in the correct classical order of Corinthian at the top, Ionic, and then Doric at the bottom. And they appear in very small format in the actual Colosseum. So the next thing are castles. So as soon as the Romans left town, about 400 AD, castles started coming out. After the Battle of 1066, Battle of Hastings, the really nice castles started coming out. But really, like 8th century, you see a lot of castles. The yellow castle includes the prerequisite castle parts of the turrets. The turrets are, there's 3 turrets here. It includes the crenellations. The crenellations are on top of the turrets. It includes the ballisteria, or the arrow slots. Maybe they didn't have arrows around that time. And the drawbridge with the pointy gate, or portcullis. All right, so here's our first quiz. There are 3 architectural terms and 1 that isn't. All right, yeah, C. C is actually a dog. Oh, yeah. So, good for you. Next thing we have is Islamic architecture. Islamic architecture used the pointed or onion dome. It's used several times in Taj Mahal. Arches also show up, lots of arches. The architectural forms of the minarets are specific to Islamic architecture. We also use complex patterns, lots of colored tile work, especially on the interiors. I don't think this model has an interior. Next up would be Romanesque. Romanesque is actually in the manner of the Romans, Romanesque. But you would consider this medieval. Romanesque used heavy masonry, very small windows, and the Romanesque arches, Romanesque round arches. You can see in this mock, it's a very symmetrical facade. It would also have a very symmetrical plan. Those Romans, they got everywhere. Next I have is Japanese architecture. Japanese architecture is traditionally made of wood with reed or tile roofs with upturned corners. And usually the walls are paper thin, often movable, and almost never load-bearing. This particular mock includes arches on the 2nd floor, but it's very rare to have arches or barrel roofs with Japanese architecture. Tudor is, what do I have it listed as, 14th century? Around Henry VIII. Henry VIII was a Tudor architecture. You see Elizabethan, Elizabeth, Victoria, Victorian, right? They align with the monarchs at the time. So Tudor architecture is noted as with exposed wood and plaster between the wood, very small windows because glass was taxed at the time. So very, very small pieces of glass You can see very small pieces of glass. The smaller the better. Oh, it's another quiz. Name the column capitals. What's the one at the top? Oh, that's pretty good. How about the one in the middle?
Ionic.
Oh, yeah, the one at the bottom.
Doric.
Oh, very good. 10 points for Gryffindor. We'll head to the Renaissance. The Renaissance kicks off around the 15th century. The Greek concepts of perspective, proportions, the classical orders are rediscovered. This is reflected in Raphael's famous School of Athens painting in this mock. So some of the other things that they rediscovered were classical symmetry, geometry, engineering, human proportions, and the concept of perspective. So perspective would be using things in the front that are bigger and things in the back that are smaller. So in theory, the ones at the back are smaller. So perspective can be, or forced perspective. You can use these in Lego to trick the human eye. So you have the big ones in the front and the small ones in the back, progressively smaller, like this mock, which has won several major awards. Josh Parkinson's North Pole mock. You can see the very large trees in the front, and the very small things in the back are unicorn horns. And so the forced perspective really comes out. So next up would be Gothic. In this case, French Gothic, Notre Dame in Paris. So Notre Dame in Paris started out 12th century as Romanesque, small windows, heavy masonry, rounded arches, and it evolved to 14th century French Gothic Renaissance, which used pointed arches, large glass, and the flying buttresses. So it evolved over the course of its construction into a different architectural style. So colonial, U.S. colonial, 1600s, 1700s. Colonial is primarily residential in nature. It's also called salt box, Cape Cod, French colonial, Spanish colonial. Usually includes symmetrical construction, square or rectangular shapes, 2 or 3 stories, like the Home Alone house. Fine example of colonial. Victorian. Victorian comes next, 1840s to 1900. Steeply pitched roofs, bay windows, octagonal or round towers, intricate carvings or colorings. This is French Victorian, but you can see U.S. Victorian and the painted lady houses of San Francisco. Same thing, very tall, very colorful, very cool. So I threw in Old West. Old West is not an architectural style. It's something that happened. It comes up as a motif primarily in cinema and storytelling. These buildings are always made of wood. They usually have a false front so that they can have a sign, and that's much taller than the building itself. The buildings are actually much smaller behind the facade. Old West. Now, we went through Greek, we went through Roman. Oh, they were discovered in the Renaissance, and now we have neoclassical. 18th century to 19th century. Neoclassical is used all over the world. You can see the Greek pediment, it's at the top. You can see the, let's see, are these Corinthian? I think they're Corinthian columns. It revisits the Greek temple. So you can also see this revival styles like institutional Gothic, which is what most universities of any pedigree have, university Gothic. Notre Dame as a library or a dormitory, I don't know, but you can see some of those buildings at the University of Washington. So this is a great time to talk about the windows, or fenestration. Fenestration is an architectural term to refer to the openings in the building's facade. There are 3 components, which is windows, doors, and skylights. So this fenestration illustrates three kinds of windows. Let's see, what do we got? We got rectangular, we got square, ones with a little pediment on top, and they're all aligned in perfect proportion, right? It's perfect. So let's see, next we have Prairie School. Prairie School, which includes bungalows, craftsmen, mid-19th century, 20th century, were epitomized by Frank Lloyd Wright. They usually have low-pitched roofs, wide overhangs, prominent porches, multiple small windows. The interiors always have exquisite craftsmanship. It's always wood, always wood. Lots of built-ins, nooks, fancy trims. Next I have Art Nouveau, which was influenced by the natural world. So Art Nouveau includes spectacular colors and shapes epitomized by the Tiffany lamp. So if you have a Tiffany lamp, you have geometric detailing, chevrons, sunbursts, bright opulent colors, fragmented triangular shapes, parapets, and spires. So we go into the next version, which is Art Deco or Art Decoratifs. Usually includes geometric volume, symmetry, straight lines, finely sculpted ornament, and mosaic friezes. In the US, you have brightly colored architectural terracotta and glazed facades. So it's time for another quiz. Which one of these best describes fenestration? Oh, the window. Yes, it's the window. All right, you guys are paying attention. The next one is Bauhaus. Bauhaus, 1920s, 1930s, from the Bauhaus School of Art and Architecture in Weimar, Germany. You'll notice things are speeding up. Lots of styles in the 20th century. So German modernism, this is not Walter Gropius, but usually includes flat roofs, smooth facades, built for mass production. International style, 1930s, 1970s, features architecture as volume, planar construction, surfaces creating the forms, regularity in the facade, and no applied ornament. In this case, the ornament is color. Rejecting the ornament styles of the past, clean lines, large windows, curtain walls, which are not load-bearing. So the next one is Brutalism. Brutalism, I couldn't find a good one online, but Brutalism is 1950s, 1970s, heavy appearance, lack of ornamentation, usually masonry, sharp surfaces, really sharp surfaces that can cut you. UW Gould Hall is a good example of Brutalism. Very cubic, just like Scrooge McDuck's money bin. So you go from lack of ornamentation to complete ornamentation, in this case Googie, 1950s, 1960s, futuristic, very upswept roofs, curvilinear, geometric shapes, bold use of glass and neon. Googie has space-age features, symbolic of motion, such as boomerangs, flying saucers, and atoms, diagrammatic atoms or parabolas. So we've got 3 left on my list. The next one I'm using is postmodern. So postmodern, right? We've gone through all these things. You start with Greek and Roman, and then the antithesis of Greek and Roman, which is kind of do whatever you want. Postmodern is a mishmash of styles, kitsch, camp, anything you want. Like an old shoe with a building on top. This would have featured very closely to Robert Venturi's duck, or an object that is just very large. We get to like today. What do we got today? Today is contemporary. Contemporary architecture is what we're primarily building today, veering away from postmodern, brutalist, modernist. An example would be pretty much any football stadium, baseball stadium, large high-rise hotel, even Meydenbauer Center would be contemporary. So what comes next? What comes next? We got to have something that comes next. How about high tech? High tech. This is an example of an actual building in Bangkok, Thailand, the robot building. So we started this building looking at the Greek caryatid columns, representing the classical form, human proportions. And we have a human proportion building that you can actually occupy. You can go and your office can be in the head of the robot building. So there are examples of high tech that are starting to come out. This is maybe the epitome. So we get to today, high tech. So that's what I got. Thank you. I'll be taking any questions.
I've seen architecture from the Soviet era that is really stark and heavy. Is that an example of brutalism?
It would be one example of brutalism. There's lots of examples, including a very tall hotel in North Korea that they stopped building for about 40 years. They just finished it. It's a very, very tall building in North Korea. Yeah, Soviet architecture, very brutalist.
Where would new formalism fit into all this?
Oh, new formalism would be somewhere in the mix. There's so many styles coming out. It's hiding between modern, googie, contemporary, somewhere in there. There's lots of styles, lots of competing styles. What happens after contemporary, right? Contemporary is today's architecture. Post-contemporary? Post-contemporary, nouveau. Yeah.
From the virtual world, can you recommend any books that showcase the different types of architecture in Lego?
Oh, what a great question. There's some books that you probably find them downstairs. Great books on how to build classical architecture in Lego as well as modern architecture in Lego. I think they sell them downstairs.
What about Tom's book, The Lego Architect?
The Lego Architect? Well, yeah, that's awesome.
All right, I don't mean this as a trick question, but any tips for someone who wants to build something Frank Gehry-like, but in minifigure scale?
Oh, Frank Gehry, man. No. His forms are very swoopy. If you look at Disney Hall, it's organic and
I have a suggestion. You're not going to like it. Build something and light it on fire and get it in motion.
yeah, thanks, Tom.
I was thinking maybe fabric.
It's his forms are very crazy. Yeah, just try it. See what you come up with.
You described mostly the sort of structural parameters of the different styles. I'm curious, maybe before we started just using plate glass for everything, are there different types of glass styles, the bottle glass or leaded glass or that sort of thing that would have different visual appearances in the windows themselves of the different styles?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I don't know if Lego makes a bottled glass. That would be very cool. Yeah. Like you take something solid and you drill holes in it to create a bottled glass look. Yeah, that would be very cool. I built Smith Tower. It's downstairs in the exhibition. I could only use a certain size window for that. The proportions of Smith Tower are that the windows are very big, And so I couldn't find any that were big enough. So the scale or proportion of the building is not minifig scale. It's like one step below because I couldn't find windows that were the right size. So yeah, just try your best. There's an excellent exhibit at Museum of History and Industry, downtown Seattle, Lake Union, where, Tom, you're speaking there, I think. Yeah. And they have a whole lot of high rises that are microscale. And some of these MOCs, some of these builds are like, 15 feet tall. They're amazing. And how do you get the scale, right, with some of this? It's, yeah, it's a real trick. It's a real trick. And there's a video that accompanies this where the builders said they only had 3 kinds of Lego glass. It was like yellow, blue, and white. And they had to try to figure out how to best get the architectural glass to read. And so they put like different colors behind the glass to try to make the depth and the color match the original designs. So it's a real trick. Yeah, bottle glass. Good idea. There's a profit center right there.
Kind of on that subject then of glass, because I in my little bag here, I did get kind of a cool. It's a piece that only shows up in the big lighthouse. It's one in there.
Oh, the
and
Fresnel lens.
The Fresnel lens.
Yes.
So anybody who's interested in that, but it looks like it'll fit on a thing. But it does have, it's designed to look kind of like the Fresnel lens you would find in a lighthouse. But I don't know how available it is on Lego.com or anything else, but it's because it's only shown up in the 2 sets.
Yeah, it's only
one
in 2
lighthouse.
sets. It's very
Lighthouse,
cool.
and then there was a mech type thing. I can't remember if it was a Marvel or a Ninjago or something. Okay. Yeah. So, anyhow, just on that.
And they're for sale. Go see Michelle. It's a twofer. Okay, any last questions? I'm going to say thank you. You've been a great audience. I'm here all day.